The Russian-Ukrainian war is a good mirror. In this mirror, we can see not only the tactics of the new era, but also the strength of sanctions imposed by Western countries. If the People's Liberation Army of Chinese retakes Taiwan by force, Western countries will not necessarily follow in the footsteps of the United States, but sanctions against China cannot be avoided. Therefore, before China recovers Taiwan by force, in addition to military factors, it also needs to fully consider the sanctions of Western countries. Can China withstand such sanctions? Since the Russian-Ukrainian war, Western countries have continuously strengthened sanctions against Russia, including political, economic and cultural sanctions, and sanctions have been increasing. However, Russia did not fall because of this, because Russia was supported by China and the Russian economy did not collapse. Up to now, the Russian-Ukrainian war has been going on for a year and a half, and there is no victory or defeat. The patience of Western countries is also losing little by little. As far as the United States is concerned, President Biden faces campaign pressure next year. If the Russian-Ukrainian war has not been resolved by then, or if Ukraine under the support of NATO does not achieve a final victory, then it will be difficult for President Biden to hold on. So, at a critical point in the visit of Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu to Russia, the United States issued a deadly sanction to Russia. It can be said that if Russia cannot find a suitable response to this sanction, then Russia will be completely crushed by Western countries. At the same time, this also gave the PLA a wake-up call to the recovery of Taiwan. So why did the United States choose to announce sanctions against Russia at this time? The reason is that the United States sees the possibility of China and Russia further cooperating militarily, so the United States wants to take the opportunity of sanctions against Russia to warn China and let China know how powerful the United States is. And it is also a response to the Chinese Defense Secretary who chose to communicate and dialogue with the Russian military instead of communicating with the US military. During Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu's visit to Russia, when attending the Moscow International Security Conference, Li had already stated to Russia that the Sino-Russian Strategic Cooperative Partnership is not aimed at a third party and will not waver in any way. In other words, China and Russia are cooperating, not military allies. For the United States, as soon as the Chinese and Russian militaries come into contact, the United States will feel threatened. So, during the Moscow Security Conference, the United States announced the order to impose sanctions on Russia. It is reported that the internet giant Microsoft announced that from September 30th this year, it will stop providing relevant services to Russia, when Russian companies may not be allowed to renew Microsoft's products or services. Further, Microsoft will completely abandon the Russian market and completely stop the Russian business. Based on the news from the Russian side, Microsoft has written a letter of apology to all Russian companies, saying that because of the system, especially the payment system obstacles, it may not be allowed to provide services to Russian companies. That is, Russian companies cannot send money to Microsoft's account. Naturally, Microsoft does not provide services. Is it really the payment system? Microsoft cannot go against the will of the US government. So, this is the sanctions launched by the US government against Russia. In Russia, no company can replace Microsoft or replace Microsoft's role in the internet. Therefore, once Microsoft's service expires, it will have a great adverse impact on the Russian economy and people's livelihood. Therefore, this time the United States sanctions Russia, China should also pay attention. Because the United States can sanction Russia, it can also sanction China.